All right, thank you, Evan, for starting the meeting, and we'll give everybody just one more minute to let everybody in before we formally start the meeting. Thank you. Evan, can you mute all the participants, please? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Glenn. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm in Rochester, Minnesota. Where are you?
All right, so let's formally kick off the meeting. We have our corporate secretary, Rev Law, managing the meeting this morning. So welcome everyone to the annual general meeting. I want to just say a few words before we get started. Rev Law has me having to read a script here around voting, etc. And as most of you know, I'm not a scripted person, but I will go on script in about 30 seconds. So again, welcome everybody to the TRX Gold 2024 annual general meeting of shareholders. It's appreciated to have you here today. And today we're going to give you a brief overview of the direction that the company would go. A few slides and words for myself at the end of the formal agenda, which is the formal agenda of voting, etc., which our new chairman will lead you through. So the agenda today will be the formalities of the meeting, followed by, after that meeting is closed, there will be a brief overview of the business by myself and where we're going, then followed by some Q&A. Before we start, though, I'd like to acknowledge that our chairman and founder passed away in the last year. It saddens all of us. He was a visionary, both from a company perspective, but also on the gold markets. And he is, I know I miss him at times. Even his boisterous, blustery voice phoning me up and you know, trying to put me in the right direction. That's often missed at times as well, and certainly our intellectual conversations are missed. So I'd like to formally recognize that, Jim did pass away in the past year, and it saddens us all. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the formalities. And then I'm going to pass the meeting over to both Shubal and Norm, who will lead the group through the formal part of the agenda and the meeting. So this is what I'm voting. Rev Law has asked me to read out the following, so be patient. For those registered shareholders present online who wish to vote during the meeting, please check in with the scrutineers, who are Rev Law and Odyssey Trust Company, to verify your identity and shareholder control number on your proxy form. No, you must be a registered shareholder in order to vote today. If you hold your shares through an intermediary such as broker, you needed to vote online or through your broker prior to this meeting, as explained in the circular. If there are any shareholders online now who wish to cast their vote during the meeting, please speak up now or indicate in the chat box so the scrutineers can add you to the attendance and track your voting. Please note that the webcast will be recorded. Shareholders have the opportunity to ask questions of management by submitting your questions via the chat function of this meeting, which questions will be addressed upon completion of the formal part of the meeting and remarks from management. Now, without further ado, we'll begin the formal part of the meeting, followed by remarks from myself, Mike, and Andrew. And now it's my pleasure to turn over to our new chairman of the board, Mr. Rakit, who is sitting across the table from me. Over to you, Shubal.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Annual General and Special Meeting at TRX. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So I am the chairman of the corporation, and in accordance with the corporation articles and approval of the board, I'll act as chairman of the meeting. Just before we get to some of the formalities, I thought I'd just touch on a few things as we lead into the further discussion with Steve and his team as well. I joined the board in early 2021, and over the last 3 months and 3 years, we've seen dramatic change in this business, going from losing money to making money, in my most simple words. we have a very strong and dedicated and tenacious management team, along with our local employees in Tanzania, who really contributed to turning around this business and setting us up for growth. And in addition, with our team, we've also started to make significant advances in ESG initiatives. We have built schools, we've built hospitals. We're more visible in the community over there. I mean, Steve's been over there probably 7 times this year. I was there last summer. So we're beginning to be a lot more engaged in community as we try to grow this business. So really, as we go forward, our next stage is to build on Jim's vision for Buckreef. Our top priority is to optimize the operations and to significantly increase production through this year. And this will drive our planning towards working towards becoming a 100,000 ounce per annum producer as we go forward. And to get there, after I actually went there last summer with Steve and visited and spent time on the project site itself, walked the operations with our team, and I really saw what excites Andrew and his geological team around what the potential of this resource is really all about. And what we are really going to do is work towards continuing to allocate capital in a very disciplined fashion to not only grow our production, but also to increase our drill bit activity to expand the operations as we go forward. Lastly, I would just say, building relationships with government is equally a top priority for us to ensure that we have strong relationships, active dialogue and engagement with the government. And we have strengthened our team locally to actively engage on an ongoing basis to make sure that we're close to them as we see them forward. And what we're seeing at the government level today in Tanzania is they are open for business. They have a strong young leadership team at government who are attracting investment, who want to attract investment to grow more rapidly. So all in all, very positive on where we can go from here. I think we've starting to turn the corner, and I think more to come as the year progresses. So with that, I'd like to pass it on over to Norm Betts, our director of our corporation, to conduct the formalities of the meeting.
Thank you, Shubo. My name is Norman Betts. I've been on the board since 2005, and I have to say something about Jim. In addition to the things that Steve has said, he also had a great sense of humor. And as I'm sitting here, I'm reminded of a number of years ago when he introduced me to the AGM as audit committee chair, and he referred to me as Norman, never a nit too small to pick bets. And so that was his way of expressing his view of accountants in a very friendly way. So I've got fond memories of Jim. So we'll now move to the formalities. Karen Hobbs of Odyssey Trust Company is present electronically and will act as scrutineer. I will ask Carmen Digest of Review Law to act as secretary of the meeting. I have before me the declaration of Odyssey Trust Company, transfer agent for the corporation, attesting to the due mailing on January 30th, 2024 of the notice of meeting, the information circular and proxy. I would ask the secretary to table the declaration of mailing and the notice of meeting and information circular and append them to the minutes of this meeting. We have extra copies available and would invite any shareholder or proxy holder to review them. In view of this, I will dispense with calling for reading of the notice, and I will ask the secretary to file the declaration as to the mailing within the minutes of this meeting. Section 2.02 of the corporation's bylaws stipulates that a quorum for the transaction of business at a meeting of shareholders is 2 persons present in person holding or representing not less than 20% of the total number of issued shares entitled to vote. I have before me the scrutineer's interim report indicating that there are a total of 400 shareholders represented by proxy holding 139,606,302 shares, representing 50.01% of the issued and outstanding shares. I therefore declare that a quorum is present and the meeting is regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business. As all votes have been cast by way of proxy, I confirm that as management's proxy nominee, Stephenmullowney will be making the motions, and as a significant shareholder corporation, Shubo Rakit will be seconding the motions. The minutes of the last annual meeting held on February 23rd, 2023 were filed in the minute book and are available for inspection. With your consent, I propose we dispose of the reading of these minutes and the minutes be taken as read, approved, and adopted as tabled. Are there any objections? No questions or objections have been raised. Thank you. The first item of business is the presentation of the audited annual financial statements. Audited financial statements for the last fiscal year ended August 31st, 2023, together with the auditor's report, were made available under the corporation's profile in SEDAR and mailed to registered shareholders who requested them. I hereby declare that the audited financial statements for the last fiscal year of the corporation ended August 31st, 2023, are hereby received as submitted. A management update and question and answer period will be conducted at the end of the formal part of this meeting. The next item of business is to set the number of directors of the corporation for the ensuing year. As noted in the management information circular, management recommends that the number of directors be set at 5. I now call for the following motion. Be it resolved that the number of directors of the corporation to hold office for the ensuing year is set at 5. But I have a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, I move that the resolution be adopted.
I second the matter.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shubo. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As the majority of the proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The next item of business is the election of directors to serve until the next annual meeting of shareholders and until their successors are duly elected and qualified. There are 5 directors' positions to be filled. Management has nominated the following persons to serve as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual meeting of TRX Gold and until their successors are duly elected. Stephenmullowney, Shubo Rakit, Norman Betts, Andrew Cheadle, Richard J. Steinberg. The corporation has received no other nominations for directors. I therefore declare that the nominations for directors are closed. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? Thank you. I now call for the following motion. Resolve that Stephenmullowney, Shubo Rakit, Norman Betts, Andrew Cheadle, and Richard J. Steinberg be elected as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual general meeting.
I move that that resolution be adopted.
I second the motion.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? It's a majority of the proxy votes are in favor. The motion is carried. The next item of business is to appoint an auditor for the ensuing year and authorization of the directors to fix their remuneration. As noted in the management information circular, management has proposed that Dale Matheson, Carr Hilton Labonte LLP, Chartered Accountants of Vancouver, British Columbia, be reappointed as auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year. I now call for the following motion. Resolve that Dale Matheson, Carr Hilton Labonte LLP, Chartered Accountants, be appointed as auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year, and that the directors of the corporation be authorized to fix the remuneration to be paid to the auditor.
I move that that resolution be adopted.
I second the motion.
Thank you again. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As the majority of the proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The next item of business before this meeting is the confirmation and approval of bylaw number 3, the advance notice bylaw, in the form attached as Schedule A to the Management Information Circular, which formalizes the procedures for nominating a director for the corporation and notifying shareholders. The Board of Directors adopted bylaw number 3 on January 11, 2024, and requires confirmation of the shareholders by ordinary resolution. Therefore, I ask for the following motion. Resolved that the resolution ratifying and confirming bylaw number 3 is described in the Management Information Circular of the corporation dated January 15th, 24, be hereby ratified and confirmed as a bylaw of the corporation. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I move that that resolution be adopted.
I second the motion.
Thank you again. Is there any discussion regarding this matter? As the majority of the proxy votes are in favor, the motion is carried. The regular business of the meeting has been completed, and there is no other legal business which may properly come before the meeting and which does not require notice. Since there's no further business, I will call for a motion to terminate the meeting.
I hereby move that the meeting be terminated.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Unless anyone is opposed, the formal portion of the meeting is now terminated. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I hereby declare the meeting terminated, and thank you all for your attention and interest, and I will turn it back to our chair.
Great, thank you, Norm. I'd like to now turn it back to Stephenmullowney to really deliver some remarks about the corporation, where we are, and to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you, Shubo. Christina, can you please bring up the presentation?
Absolutely.
So before we start, I'm here as CEO. We have Mike Leonard, our CFO, here as well. We have Andrew Cheadle, Director and COO. And as everybody's aware of, and I'd ask you to raise your hands, we have Richard Steinberg, one of our directors. Richard, wave your hand. There you go. Norm Betts, who was leading the meeting. And then obviously Shubo. So the first thing I'd like to address is, I've traveled quite extensively the first quarter. And obviously what's on everybody's mind to certain degrees, market conditions, particularly in the gold mining space. So one of the things that I'd like to give shareholders comfort on is we do track the movement of our shares, and we do that on a quarterly basis by the various reports that you can get from Broadridge and others. In the last year, out of the top 300 shareholders between 2023 and in 2023 at the beginning and at the end, in that group, there was a net addition of almost 5 million shares. So one of the things that we will be looking at is kind of consistently looking at the movement of those shares and where the pressure on the share price comes at. And we'll be doing a little bit more investigations on that as we move forward. The share price hasn't performed as we would have expected given the business has been performing. And sometimes that happens in markets. I can tell you that the sentiment from the BMO conference that we just attended this week, which is the largest mining conference in the world, with all the relevant companies and executives, there was a lot of discussion around valuations and how markets have become disconnected with actual company fundamentals. And, what I would say is, although our share price hasn't performed, there's a lot of others that have performed a lot worse. So, and companies that are in positions where they need to raise capital with those types of valuations. So, anything to add to that, Shubo, because you were there with me?
No, I think that's right. I mean, the companies that are disciplined and allocating capital, which we have been over the last 2 years, companies that are generating free cash flow and EBITDA are the ones that are attracting attention.
Yeah, and I haven't, and I didn't get the sense that people were disagreeing with our business plan, which we're going to present here, and the approach that we were taking. There was a lot of complimentary comments, to be quite honest, around what we've been doing and the way we've been doing it. So without further ado, I'll get into the presentation. Christina, can you go to the cautionary note?
Can you see that there?
It's just taking a little bit of time to switch.
Okay.
There we go. So obviously, we are going to be talking about forward-looking statements. I have to say this from a legal perspective. You can go to our website or presentation to look at the cautionary note. Christina, on to the next slide, please. So as Shubal mentioned at the beginning, it's taking since I joined in late 2020, early 2021, as well as the management team that you see in front of you. When we came in, we had a cash flow negative business. Luckily, we were able to raise some capital in the period, particularly around the COVID period in February of 2021. And then we had to take that limited capital and figure out how do we put together a business plan to unlock the longer term vision that Buckreef has a significant resource. And it was always our former chairman's vision that Buckreef had a lot more resources than was indicated. But the problem that we had was you have limited capital and you have an asset base and various assets to put together to go and unlock that potential value. And so the business plan that we embarked on was the resource was mineable, and from that we could get cash flow to eventually unlock the overall resources at Buckreef. Now that's taken some time, obviously. In order to put an asset into production, it does take a significant amount of time and to de-risk it to become a significant gold producer, as well as providing the cash flow to unlock the value of the property. So what I could say is I thought 2023 was a significant year in advancement of that longer term objective to really get drilling and put the drill bit in. And the reasons for that is we created quite a bit of cash flow in 2023 that was reinvested back into the asset of around $18 million. As shareholders are aware, we're currently undergoing another expansion, which will double throughput capacity in the plant from 1,000 tons per day to 2,000 tons per day. What I could say is the crushing system is predominantly complete. That's been our bottleneck for the last couple of quarters. The crushing circuit that we currently have is not able to keep up with the milling circuit. And so the crushing circuit has been expanded. First, the new crushing circuit will be 4,000 tons per day. And that's with the addition of the existing crushing circuit. Whereas the milling circuit is currently 1,000 tons per day being expanded to 2,000 tons per day, with all the components being on site. That should enable us to significantly increase production and cash flow. And then a large focus of that cash flow will be going over this gentleman over here in an exploration program in order to look at the trends that we have to develop. And Andrew will go through that again today around we're open at depth, we're open along strike, we're open to the south. That's on the main zone. We have Anfield and other zones as well that need to be further explored in order to start to release the full potential of what we believe is the full potential of this property and the blue sky nature of it. So the goal here is to make those expansions in production and use the cash flow from that to really drill out this property, as opposed to going to markets and asking shareholders for the capital, which is what a traditional junior explorer would do. Christina, next slide, please. One of the things that shareholders have asked me is, can you more accurately explain why Tanzania is investable? So one of the things our chairman has mentioned is being over on the ground and government relations. So there has been a change in the way the government is positioning itself with international investors. That changed particularly with the new president coming on board roughly about 2 years ago. It is significantly different than when I first joined and others joined the company. And, given my background, I'm not surprised by that. I've been involved in lots of countries that would be perceived as not investable and then all of a sudden become really investable. And I thought Tanzania would undergo that as well. It's undergone that more quickly than I originally anticipated. So with regards to what's happened in Tanzania over the last 24 months, there's been $2 billion in M&A and IPO transactions in the country. So who are they? One is a Kabanga Nickel through Lifezone in New York, has been listed. Another has been the OreCorp transaction, which is in a takeover battle between two companies. One is Perseus Mining, the other one is Silvercorp. Both well-heeled, financially capable companies of putting that property into production. That property sits really only around 30 kilometers from us, has 3 million ounces, anticipated to produce 200,000, capex is $500 million. So when we're seeing those transactions occur, you also have a graphite property, which is now being invested in and being put into production as well. And what you're seeing in Tanzania is gold exports are 50% of the foreign currency earnings of the country. And that is growing. So gold exports are very, very important to the Tanzanian treasury in managing the value of the shilling in its overall economic goals. So that is predominantly generated by large-scale mines, but they do want more gold mines because AngloGold Ashanti has been around for a while, although it has a really good production profile right now in the Geita mine. It won't last forever, so they do need new investment in order to maintain that level of output in the country. They want to get mining to 10% of GDP by 2025. There's an efficient local supply chain. You see that in our build. We do a lot of things locally, and we're able to do a lot of things locally. The whole crushing circuit that we're putting in, all the conveyors, all the steel works, all the tanks are all built by local people and local resources, particularly with the industrial base that sits in Mwanza, less than 3 hours away. There is reliable infrastructure. One thing that did happen in the last year, and you would have heard it on our quarterly calls, is we were on a line that was too far from the transfer station, over 100 kilometers. TANESCO moved us to a new line to get more reliable power. And that's only going to increase with the Julius Nyerere hydroelectric facility coming online. That is going to double the power that's on the Tanzanian network. They actually may become an exporter of power. So we'll be getting more reliable power over time. And from an ESG perspective, it's all going to be predominantly hydro. So that's, a lot of reasons why to invest in Tanzania. We've had a good rapport there. The government is now also working with the Chamber of Mines on rules and laws, particularly that were brought in place in the Magufuli era, and how to work with the mining community better. Proceed to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we haven't displayed, and we're getting a lot more comfortable with this in and around the region as we get used to operating in the region, the Lake Victoria Greenstone Belt. Look, at the end of the day, we're in a region that is really lit up with gold. Have been a lot of historical properties in this region. There's a lot of current properties in this region. And to be quite honest, there's a lot of artisanal mining in this region. And the reasons for that is there's a lot of gold in the region. So this will start to develop into longer term business plans of the company as we create more and more cash flow. Obviously, you need to get licenses. There are successful companies in other parts of the world that use a hub and spoke model in regards to trucking ore to processing plants. That will be something that will be looked at over time, and the genesis and the framework of that is just starting to begin. Christina, next slide, please. So I no longer talk about really 2021, 2022, and in regards to what we did. Shareholders are all familiar with that. That was what I'll call the turnaround phase, setting in place a business plan that's self-funding to really unlock the value of what we have. 2023, the good news there is the operation works. We got good recovery rates, we got good mining rates, and we're able to produce a good margin, have good EBITDA, good operating cash flow. And so from a de-risking perspective, a lot of it has occurred on the risk that you have in mining. Are you able to build on time, on budget? Yes. Are you able to process the ore at reasonable recovery rates? Yes. Are you able to make cash from processing that ore? Yes. So a lot of the risks that have occurred in the mining industry over time have been de-risked here. And now as you ramp it up to next level, we haven't been drilling a lot in the last 6 months because we put in place a plan of what I'll call 1 step backwards or 2 steps forward on the exploration. And that is to get the plant expanded, to get the increase in cash flow to really go at this right. We could have stopped at 1,000 tons a day, and you could see the cash flow profile that we had and really start drilling from that cash flow. But it makes more sense to double up the processing capacity so you do more things. So in the medium to longer term, the plan that we have in place makes a lot more sense to unlock shareholder value. We do this all safely. And in the next 6 months or so, you heard this from me last year, we will come out with a more solid business plan with regards to giving everybody comfort that this asset can produce the amount of cash flow to really unlock the value in the property. Christina, next slide, please. It's taking a little bit of time today. Oh, here we are. So this is one of the slides that when I look at the successful companies that have gotten over $1 billion market cap, and then they come out and they say, we've had, 30 quarters of growth, which is 5 to 6 years of, or even longer of growth. It has to start somewhere. And so these graphs, and you start to see these graphs start to take form. You start off with, not a lot of revenue, not a lot of profit, and you start to build upon that. So you start to see our production sales increasing, our adjusted EBITDA and cash flow from operations increasing. Now, will they go up every quarter? No, I don't think any company has done that in any of the graphs that I've seen. But the trend over time is a continual increase. So you will see some bumps down in some quarters and then leveling off like we are now. And then you have another mill expansion and you go up again. And that will be the genesis of where we go, and then you get more resources, and then you expand again, and then you're able to show that you have a long-term project with a lot of value. That's the journey that we're on. We're at the beginning part of that journey from a production and cash flow perspective. But what you can see here is on the left is a multiple of the cash that was raised when we first joined to where we are today that's been invested into the business. So we've had a net equity raise of around $23.5 million, and we've invested almost $41 million into the asset. By doing this approach, we're able to get a lot more leverage on the capital that was raised and invested into the business. It's not dollar for dollar anymore. And there's a multiple there that will go to 2, 3, 4 times, hopefully, in short order. At the same time, the G&A expenditures have come down over time on a cash basis. And, we are prudent managers around capital and managing G&A. But as the business grows, G&A will inevitably increase. But as a percentage of revenue, it will be down. And that's the key there. So I haven't put this figure out because now we're going to put that figure out, like G&A is a percentage of revenue. And that will show significant declines over time. So, we're prudent on bringing on the right resources at the right time. Christina, next slide, please. I said I would be short today, but you're getting more broader of an update than I anticipated. Let's go. People are familiar with the Buckreef project. Let's go to the next slide. So in fiscal 2023, like I said, it was a game changer because it works. Cash costs were $100,000 an ounce. We think there is ways to drive that down even further. We've rented a lot of equipment, for instance, that go directly into that cash cost number. Our cash position has been remaining steady. So we operate the business in these crappy market environments by making sure that we have adequate liquidity to execute the business plan. Sometimes you have to make tough choices, sacrifices to do that, and we're willing to do that. But as we get through these market conditions, certainly liquidity is something that we consistently look at. And we look forward to seeing how this looks next year as we expand. And more importantly, what the run rate's going to look like. And you'll get a sense of that as we get through the next couple of quarters of what the run rate of the 2,000 ton per day plant will look like. Next slide, Christina, please. So here's our 2,000 ton per day plant coming on board. I think, Christina, I'd ask you, and before you post this on the website, to put the more up-to-date pictures, please, because there's all these big components now are in the actual crushing circuit. So with the conveyors put onto it. And this is almost complete. We should be having this come online mid next week. There are a few smaller items on the tertiary crusher side that are still on a boat that will come in at the tail end, but certainly what we have there now will give us a better crush size that we're currently getting in order to get through the mill. So to just give, and I got into this in the last quarter, right now there are pieces of stone or fresh rock in its essence going in at 1.5 to 2 inches in size, which is too big for the milling circuit. The new system, with the jaw crusher and the cone crusher they see here, gets that down below 1 inch. Then when the tertiary crushers come in, which should land next week in Dar es Salaam, they'll get it down to 6 millimeters. So what that means is you're able to put the throughput through, get a better grind size, and get a higher recovery rate. Next slide, Christina. So that's in essence what I just described here. The sulfides work in the plant. With regards to the MET studies that we have undergoing, the preliminary MET study done a couple of years ago, as well as the current MET study that's underway with SGS in South Africa. What we're seeing in the fresh rock or the sulfides is exactly what we anticipated to see via the studies. So this material will have a recovery rate anywhere between 85 and low 90s, depending on the grind size that you get it down to. So the finer you grind it, so it's an energy equation, it's a throughput equation, the higher the recovery rate, the more gold that you expose in the CIL process. So that will, over time, our metallurgists will refine that to get an optimal recovery rate versus the cost that goes in. You can grind it down extremely small and get a very high recovery rate, but you won't be able to get good throughput. So you won't get maximum profit or cash flow. So there's a balance there between the two. Christine, if you could skip to the exploration side, and I'm going to have Andrew explain the exploration side to people. Slide 13, please. There we go. Andrew, you want to give an overview of where you want to drill?
Yes, Stephen, thank you very much. And again, greetings to all our shareholders. Whilst we continue to build the mine, obviously we continue to look at where we want to drill over the next year when we free up cash flow. And it's very straightforward that we will continue to drill south of the main pit. You can sort of see the coloured dots highlighting where our pits are at the moment. Our last drill holes did indicate that the deposit continues to the south, and we have indications of that through the artisanal workings. But what really excites us is what we're seeing just to the east of us. You see all these little white dots, which our geologists have identified as artisanal workings. They're all being left now. There's no active artisanal working there at all at the moment. We have a resource just to the north called the Eastern Porphyry. And then we drilled in some of those areas. And our very first program in that area came back with some extraordinarily good results. So, for example, 14 meters at 3.5 grams a ton in the Eastern Porphyry. I think when we look at the Anfield, it's about 1.5 kilometers away. Just bear that in mind. It's a significant distance. Is the top intersection there was 2.9 meters at 13.7 grams per ton. And that's also very shallow, 43 meters below surface. So what we're excited about is we've got about 3 kilometers of trend. And in that trend, there's 3 separate zones that we have to go and drill. It's an awful large target to go and work on. So we'll continue to do that. The geologist is obviously keen to do it. I'm keen to do it. And I think as shareholders, you should also be keen for us to get that drill rig going.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, you're welcome, Andrew. As I said, the business plan has been 1 step back, 2 steps forward for an exploration program, given that we're expanding operations. And you only have so much capital. You got to spend it in the right way to get it to unlock it. So, Christina, can you go to the last slide, please? Just of a picture. So with regards to, there's been a lot of activity at Buckreef in the last year. It hasn't been an easy year. We've had, there's over 400 people on site today, including contractors. We've moved the asset forward. It's cash flowing, it's working. We're going to increase it again and then really start to really focus on the drill bit. Government relations will become an increased focus as well. When I'm proud to say that, mining takes a little bit of time, but we're on the right track. I really do feel that we're on the right track, and that we have a lot more to grow at Buckreef, and the skill sets that exist in the management team. Hopefully, will create a lot of value at Buckreef, but may create value elsewhere as well, as we continually grow out the company. So that's the management update. I'd open the floor to any questions. Evan, are there any questions in the chat room, or does anybody have their mic on that would like to ask a question? No, we have a hand up. Craig, will you take off your mic and ask a question? There you go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, good to see all of you. Thanks again for the update. It's really good to see Norm. I haven't seen him in probably 5 or 6 years, so good to see that pretty face.
You're being too kind to him.
I'm trying to be a better person, I guess. Hey, this came up a lot, and I had mentioned this several years ago at the meeting with the success you guys are all having and tremendous fast tracking. It's very, very good to see. But one thing that I had asked previously, and I want to kind of put it to all of you, is because I didn't see it in the reports. Is there any insider buying from you guys of regular shares? I know part of the compensation you guys are getting, the stock and warrants or whatever that you're getting as part of your compensation package. But in an era where I guess we're looking for leadership beyond just what you're doing, like putting your actual own money into it, because the share price, I agree, there's a significant disconnect in the entire sector and has been for years. So I don't know why that is, and I hope we come to some sort of resolution. But at the stock being this low, is there any plan of you guys actually putting your own money as part of additional leadership, showing that your commitment into the company with your own money?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Obviously, going through the last couple of years, you have a lot of insider information. There's been a lot of insider information that's been released. I would say that there's still a little bit of insider information that is in our hands here that we need to get out in the next little bit. Certainly, it forms a large part of our the shares form a large part of our compensation, but I would suspect that you'll start to see more and more personal buying in the future.
Yeah, I just think that it's for shareholders and just the optics. If that's available, I think it would show, even if it's a small commitment, just showing that you guys, as part of your leadership, are exercising that, and certainly in a world where you have everybody else taking their monies out. This project is fast tracking, looking so good, but I can just tell you from certain optics that has been asked to me a lot, and I really didn't have an answer. So I appreciate your consideration.
Yeah, thank you, Craig, for your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's something that I could see happening over time. I think because we've been going through so much change in a short period of time, there's always a balancing act as to what we can do as management and the board in terms of, acquiring shares in the market. But I think it'll come over time.
Okay. And I did have one last question. I wrote this down just to be quick. As far as additional promotion of the company, because again, you certainly don't want to keep this thing a secret. It's having amazing results. I see some analysts have been picking it up, putting some price targets on it, but are we in the phase as we're building it out where you guys really want to put your foot on the gas from a promotion standpoint, or is the focus just really keep your head down, work and build a profile?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's a balance in this market, and we have this discussion all the time. So look, I have friends in other companies that promote it excessively, but you can't outmarket your financial results. Their stocks have been absolutely hammered, right? So first and foremost, you need to start to get your good financial results, and that will market itself to a certain degree. And then there's a tipping point where you start to really hammer it. And I think there's a couple of things that we need to get through before we really start to hammer on the marketing. I did mention government relations, and I did also mention the 2,000 tons per day and exploration results. So we're comfortable that this thing works now. So I would expect that you would see an increase in marketing going forward. It's not that we haven't been marketing, because I'm on the road all the time marketing, and on the phone with potential shareholders and shareholders. But I think there will be a significant increase in probably the second half of this year. This market right now, like I just returned last night. I'm a little tired today, but it is a slog. And if you talk to some asset managers, to your point, they are hauling more money out than getting in. There's just, ultimately everything is retail. Even institutional managers are retail. And retail continues to haul out money in mutual funds and et cetera. So tough market conditions, but we need to get, as I addressed right up front, we have a good idea where the shares are moving. I got to really figure out and put some more effort into figuring out who's hammering it down. Because, that's a little bit of a mystery. It's not the shareholder group. I can tell you that much.
No. And I agree. And it's not like, before when we were in, $4, $5, $6, $7 range, you had a lot of shorting, naked shorting. I can't see that at 33 cents. That just doesn't make sense. I don't know if it's an algorithm based thing that's holding it down or, the mystery, but at some point with results and as you guys are working and doing your diligence and building this company out, at a minimum, it would have to be, in my opinion, to go back to at least fair value. And what that is, that'll be a numerical thing by what you're putting out. So I'm very happy with the way the company's going.
Yeah.
But at some point that share price has to be realized.
Yeah, so say if there is what you talked about, shorting and all that sort of stuff, ultimately, like we can't overly control the markets. We can only, as long as we put in place a business plan that executes against those financial results, it has to get the fair value. At some point, someone comes in and buys it.
Yep.
Or if we ever get to an MBO point where we have enough liquidity, maybe the company has to buy it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I think, one thing, Craig, like we were just at the BMO Mining Conference, and we did quite a few meetings on Monday and Tuesday. And I could tell you it was a lot of smart money that we met with, and they would have seen the company 2-3 years ago, which didn't look great, to be honest with you. And they were pleasantly surprised. I think we're going to start getting on their radar screen. There are a couple of analysts that are starting to take a look at us a little bit more. We had one of the banking firms visit the operations about 2 weeks ago and came back with some positive thinking around where we're heading, what we're doing. So I think as we get more engagement, different stakeholders and smart money, that'll help bring our story to the forefront as we get to the latter part of this year, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting, Shubo, when you mention that. I almost look at it's like in this industry, nobody's on board at one point in time, and then all of a sudden you do what you're doing, then everybody jumps on board.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not an industry where people gather up over time and move in. It's almost like it's all or nothing. And as Shuba mentioned, I was in Tanzania a couple of weeks ago, and I was over there with one of the major bank analysts that covers the sector, and that bank does diligence. So they were over there essentially doing diligence.
Good. Well, thank you again for everything you guys are doing, and continued success.
And thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Greg. Stephen, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat I can read off here if that's helpful. We can address them.
Yeah.
So I think the first question we've got here online is how many meters were drilled in 2023 and how many reserve ounces were increased? Perhaps a question for our Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah, so we drilled about 10,000 meters last year, and we're still in the process of assessing the reserves and working with our external consultants, 2 groups of them, on that number. We're not able to talk about it at this point in time publicly.
The forward.
The forward-looking statement, yeah.
Yeah, like the forward drilling, look, to be quite honest, that's going to be determined by how much cash comes in. And so what you'll see us do there is build up a little kitty of cash and then put forward the drill program.
Okay, very good. I guess we had another question asking whether some of our former chairman's shares had been sold down in 2023, and was someone in fact selling, and by comparison, others had seen buy orders by management.
Yeah, so look on Jim's shares in 2023, as we released in some of our disclosures, Jim was selling some shares for personal living expenses in 2023. What is happening to his shares since he's become deceased? That is in his estate, and we won't have the same level of knowledge of that going forward.
Okay, and I think finally there was a comment in response to the earlier question around allocation of capital and potentially share buybacks in the future. But that will be a capital allocation decision as we continue to grow and develop free cash. Yeah,
look, at the end of the day, if the stock is way undervalued and there's a better pop there versus the value creation that you get by making, say, another plant increase, that will be made then. And if it gets into 20s, it's probably a little bit of a buyback. Yeah.
I think those were all the questions we had online. Any other questions from the shareholders participating live?
Can you hear me?
I can, Glenn. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me express my opinion that I thoroughly enjoyed your direct, understandable presentation. I'm totally and completely happy with what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm not an expert in mining. I feel very comfortable with the shares that I have that I will now attempt to acquire just a few more on my budget as it permits. And I want to thank you again. I appreciated your presentation and the time and effort you put forth in doing it. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being a shareholder, Glenn.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the group or online?
You guys are going easy on us this morning, so.
Well, you've earned it.
All right.
Going easy.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah.
I think there has been a question added. This was from a longtime shareholder referring to what looks like the legacy drilling data markers indicating a reverse cone deposit structure and deposits at depth. And when do we expect to initiate some of the deep drilling that Jim had theorized based on this reverse cone?
Yeah, good. This is, Jim is a character at times. And the discussion around when I was reviewing things, the reverse upside down ice cream cone deposit was, I'm chuckling now and I chuckled then when I heard it. So look, I think the way the market has gone is it's great to have ounces. Yeah, now that's one thing, but I can tell you in today's market, ounces matter, but aren't the key determiner, because what the market wants to see is ounces that can be cash flowed, i.e. ounces that can be mined. And even the standards within the mining community have changed. So before, and Andrew, I always give him a hard time about this, is there used to be a concept of you would report ounces that could be mined in the fullness of time, which means, i.e. it's there, and if gold went to $1 million an ounce, then it could be mined. That was the concept. Now the new concept is you have to be able to report ounces that can be mined at basically the current price. And so the focus is really going to be on, as Andrew described, mineable ounces. So in Anfield, shallower ounces. Mm-hmm. So for instance, in growing out the resource base, we believe there's enough in the shallower resources to be really valuable. That's where the drill bit focus is going to be on. There are intercepts in the deposit 750 meters deep, but it costs $250,000 to drill those holes. I think I prefer you to drill 10 to 20 holes at 40 meters and get ounces in than to do those type of holes. So I don't, look, we do know that the deposit will go underground. There's high grade shoots underground. We do know all that data. But if you want to bring on mineable ounces, it's going to be shallower holes here. That's our view of the deposit.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen. We do know the deposit will go underground. That we have certainly seen with our work. But to the person's question, the deposit does carry on deeper. It's not it's cone, but we've got high grade shoots that carry on deeper, and the geology is such that we know that is occurring. The other thing that's very important to take away from the comments around the parallel trend is you can have 2 or 3 pits.
Yeah, that's right.
And therefore you can increase your production. If like there's only so much you can get out of one hole in the ground. If you've got 2 holes, 2 pits, you get more ounces. And that's why the focus is on that parallel trend.
So I've done a lot of valuations of mining companies, and so you have to look at, to the point there's been discussion on some, what's undervalued and what's overvalued and things of that nature. And there's lots of metrics in there. One is resources, obviously. Another is EBITDA, cash flow, price to net asset value, price to cash flow, EPS. All of those metrics go into a football chart to determine what a fair value of a company is. So ounces is one metric that drives that. The goal here is, in any valuable mining project, especially currently and from what I've seen in my career, you have to have a decent amount of production that can go well over 10 years. So the resources need to be drilled out enough to go well over 10 years at a really good production rate. That's a valuable mining project. So you could put 50 million ounces there, but if you're only doing 200,000 a year, 40 million of those ounces don't matter.
Stephen, there's been a follow-up question here, and the question is whether we could provide an update on the joint venture structure, the 55-45 joint venture split with the government.
Yeah, obviously that agreement was entered into in 2012. What I would say is there needs to be updates to that agreement, and that would be in the benefit of both parties. And I will leave it at the fact that, there needs to be updates to that, and I'm over in Tanzania quite a bit. And take what you may from that.
Thank you.
I think those were all the questions that we had online. Any final questions from the group?
No, I don't think so. Mike, thanks for taking over the meeting and then again.
Okay, we got to get through the electronic questions. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for being a shareholder. We greatly appreciate the support you had. As I mentioned, we do look at turnover of shareholder, and we know that we have a very solid shareholder base that supports us and are very pleased for that. There's been a good turnout in voting, over 300 shareholders for 50% of the shares outstanding. So we appreciate your support, and my phone, Jubal's phone, and Andrew and Mike's phone, and the other director's phone is always open. So do not hesitate to give us a call.
Don't forget about me, Stephen. Your VPIR
Yes,
is
Christina
always,
too.
Christina.
always
Phone
welcome
Christina
to receive
first.
phone calls.
Phone
And I
Christina
just-
first.
Yeah, I'd just like to say also over the last few weeks, reaching out to a lot of our longtime shareholders. It's really been a pleasure to speak to everybody over the phone, and I'm always available for a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as they would say in Tanzania, asante sana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.